Agnieszka, thank you so much for coming to this episode of the Cross Border podcast. We're having today Agnieszka Radziwinowicz. I hope I pronounce it correctly.
You did well.
Super. Assistant professor at the University of Warsaw, the Center for Migration Research at the University of Warsaw. Agnieszka is the principal investigator of a project there on deportations from the Great Britain to Poland and Romania.
And Lithuania.
And Lithuania. There are three countries. You're right. Can we start our conversation today with this topic? Why should we care about the few thousand people who are deported from the United Kingdom to these three countries?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's a relatively small number of people. There are millions of other people involved in other forms of mobility. Why should we care about this topic?
Thank you for this question, and thank you very much for this invitation. I'm really happy to be here in Cluj. So we should care about them for many different reasons, and one of the reasons is that there is no other research dealing with this topic, and this academic silence on this topic is really surprising me. That it's not a topic that would interest the scholars. Excuse me, in the UK or in countries that have received bigger numbers of deportees when it comes to EU deportees from the UK. So I decided to step in and research it myself. And I started doing my research in the context of Brexit. I started thinking about this research in 2016 after the referendum, when it was decided that the UK would leave the European Union. And I started my research in 2018. So I was already looking at these deportations of EU citizens still in the context of UK being a EU member state. And I realized that although in the European Union, it's on paper when it comes to law on the books, it's difficult to deport a EU citizen. They have to be a threat to public policy or public security. The UK was actually deporting significant numbers of EU citizens. And when we were looking at the statistics, Central and Eastern Europe was the most affected. So I wanted to research the reasons for it, and I'm happy to speak more about it later if you guys are interested. But that was interesting because these numbers were significant also in comparison to people who are not European Union citizens, who are so-called third country nationals. So like in 2019, almost half of all deportations were EU citizens. So I really wanted to understand the reasons for it. And yeah, I believe that's important to research deportations because it's a huge and global topic in a sense that deportations are on agenda not only in the UK but also globally. Now we hear a lot about deportations in the US, but also in Poland, where I am based. Deportations also start to appear in the political discourse as a promise that the politicians want to deliver to their voters. So there's definitely political capital that the politicians think that they will build on the basis of promising to deport foreigners. And I think it very much speaks a lot about where our societies are going. So I believe it is important to research it. And I think that we should understand what is happening in the context of Central and Eastern Europe. We should understand what is happening to our fellow citizens. People were deported when UK was still in the European Union. People were deported in relatively big numbers in comparison to other nationalities, to Romania, to Poland. But there was not only academic silence, but there was also in the media discourse, there was very, I would say, loud silence that nobody was interested in the topic.
Or on the NGO side, right?
Or
the human rights defenders.
In fact, the role of NGOs is very problematic because there were some NGOs that participated in this process of voluntary returns, international reconnections, and deportations.
So they were supporting the schemes of returning, right?
Yes. So especially in the UK, there were I will go a little bit into the details if I may.
Yes.
So till now I've been talking about deportations, which is a procedure when somebody has a criminal record. So on the basis of criminality, some kind of convictions, they are being deported on the grounds of criminality. But the UK is a very interesting country because in 2010s, in the second decade of the 21st century, in the UK there was a set of unofficial secretive operations by the Home Office that were targeting street homeless people. In the UK context, they are called rough sleepers. So those policies were those. In fact, not so much policies, but rather operations were being developed in the London borough of Westminster. So Westminster is an important place when it comes to accumulation of capital, where many very rich people live, where are big businesses, but also the parliament is situated there. But not only them, there are also people who live on the streets. So the UK Home Office developed a series of operations that were aimed at identifying people who lived on the street and sending them back to their countries of origin in a way to manage the street population of the city. So when it comes to NGOs, the charities, there were the two big charities, homelessness charities in the UK. They participated in those operations, and this is something that was really problematic. And their participation consisted in identification of the people, cooperation with the police and the Home Office. That led to the deportation of these individuals. And if I already speak about these operations, it's also important to mention that they later developed in a nationwide policy that...
So it's happening in other cities, not only in London.
Yeah, exactly. So it was happening in other London boroughs and other cities in the UK with street homeless population. And that was evolving between 2016, 2017, when street homeless people were deported only because they were sleeping on the streets. So there were actually people who worked or studied. According to EU treaties, they were subject to EU freedom of movement. But the UK, in a very original way, identified rough sleeping as an abuse, and later it redefined it to misuse of the freedom of movement, and sent significant number of street homeless people to Romania and to Poland. And I really find it problematic that in my country of origin and here in Romania as well, this was not problematized as well. The country didn't step in to advocate for the rights of their citizens who are actually being scrapped of their right to freedom of movement. Who did step in were the local activists in London and in other UK places who prepared a legal challenge. The policy was taken to the court, and in December 2017, the High Court found the policy unlawful, and the Home Office stopped
doing it.
Yes. So
for their understanding, sleeping on the street was understood as a criminal offense, and based on it, they did the deportations.
It wasn't understood as a criminal offense, so people could not be charged for it and sentenced for it. They were seen as abusing the freedom of movement, so it was a sufficient basis to administratively remove them on the grounds of immigration laws. So that was like, in practice, how it looked is it was like this, that the people were sleeping on the streets, they would be approached by the police or by the Home Office, they would be detained in immigration removal centers, and they would be later sent to their countries of origin.
Is there any, besides the citizenship, you mentioned Polish, Romanian, and Lithuania as the majority of people being deported as a EU citizen. Is there any specific regions or maybe specific gender or specific socio-demographic of the people in this situation?
That's a very good question. So, the nationality is important. So, when we look at the statistics, these two nations are still important, and they were very important before Brexit as well. And in my research, I say of what I call differentiated deportability. And by this, I want to say that not everybody is equally likely of being deported in a given national context. So in the context of UK, nationality was one important factor. Another important factor, as you mentioned, was gender. Males are more often important than women. When it comes to class, that's super important. People on no income or very low income are likely to be deported. And this is because some of them sleep on the streets, and this is how they are really like exposed to immigration enforcement. And they were particularly exposed to it during the policies that I just described. But it's still happening. So the level of income and the class is important, because if for some whatever reason a person is targeted for deportation, and the Home Office, which is the agency that is responsible for deportations, targets them for deportation, it's important to resist it, and it's important to, if possible, appeal against. So in order to be able to do this, it's good to have a solicitor. And the system is privatized in the UK. So there is no legal aid for immigration cases.
Only for asylum, as you mentioned, yeah?
Only for asylum, that's correct. And so when somebody has to pay for an immigration solicitor, we're talking about a lot of money. So, for instance, now the people that I'm in contact with who are in immigration detention, they're talking about sums such as £10,000. So it must be that the person themselves has a lot of economic capital, or they have strong networks in the UK, and people who are able to provide for their solicitor, or who are able to, in a quick manner, gather a lot of money in order to organize a good solicitor, to access them, to pay for their services. And it might be like a long time that they will have to use the services, because first there is a notice to a person liable to removal, which is a letter. You have to reply to the letter. The letter costs money. Then you have to pay for the representation in the Immigration and Asylum Tribunal. So it's all expensive, but as you already see, it's also complicated.
Yeah.
It is
As
a
a process.
complicated process, exactly. So it's a system that is complex. And this is another factor that comes into play, which is the knowledge of English. The documents are in English.
And not easy to understand one.
Exactly. It's a legal language. It's legal language that is being used. So it's important to have somebody who will translate it into more vernacular language, not only to your language, the language that you're able to understand. And then another factor is the mental capacity to understand, the symbolic capital to understand the legal process. And obviously, the people who lack it are more likely to just get loose in this system and end up in their country of citizenship.
And that I totally agree, and that this is also related to my own experience of doing research in Great Britain in different cities. What I saw is that very often the people doing rough sleeping on the streets, they're very often from the Roma communities, at least for the Romanian case, because this is the group of people I was doing research about. And is it the case also with the deportation? Is this one of the groups which is particularly targeted by this policy?
Yes, it is. I mean, in my research, I don't focus only on the Roma people, because this is the deportation is a phenomenon that's targeting people all across, but there is an overrepresentation of the Roma people. So ethnicity, when it comes to the factors that you asked about, ethnicity is important. So the Roma have been targeted, both Romanian Roma, Polish Roma targeted for deportations. And it's also important to mention that these home office policies that I already mentioned that date back to 2010, 2014, 2015, unofficial secretive operations of the home office, some of them targeted specifically the Roma people living in Westminster. There was one operation developed in 2014 by the Home Office in cooperation with the Romanian embassy that was called Operation Cefornac. And this operation targeted the Roma people living on the streets of Westminster, and it was the date was not surprising for you guys, I assume, because it was just before the opening of the UK labour market, and the idea was to clean. Excuse me for the word. The streets from the people not to spoil the Romanian image. It sounds really. I know that this is terrible, but I find it really interesting that there was even this transnational cooperation in order to develop these policies. So there is definitely this ethnic factor is important, and there was and is some ethnic profiling into this problem.
In the same time, you mentioned this silence on the member state whose citizens were abused in these deportations. But one of the missions you just described, I think it involved some Romanian authorities. So they were helping the British authorities in doing these activities, right?
The Operation Cefornac was a good example that the involvement of the country of origin was not a resistance or not a protection of the rights of their citizens, but all the way around. It was rather cooperation in order to fulfill the priorities of the deporting state in this case.
Okay, so we have a different context and situation than from what we would expect and from what we
exactly
assume. I like very much this term that you mentioned, the deportability one.
The differentiated deportability.
Yes, I know. It sounds a bit quantitative, and sounds like employability or other terms that were working a lot. I also remember when I was doing research that people were aware of this status, that they are more likely to be deported or not. They were aware of it because if someone was missing some IDs, or if they were looking in a specific way, they would be more careful when they go out and what they do and so on. Do you also see this in your interviews and in your research? Are they aware of this vulnerable situation they are in?
Yes, people are aware of and there is like a lot of vulnerabilities we're talking about, and we may also later want to speak about like the new docility of the migrant population post-Brexit, and this is related to the new status that we have to have in the UK. But if we want to continue with what we were talking about, the rough sleepers. People are aware of their vulnerability, and they are well aware of the operations that were taking place. And the involvement of the charities in the past. So this very much affected the way the people see the charities as a possible threat as well, and so it increased their and they already come with certain level of mistrust. If they come from the Roma populations, they have lived through generations with mistrust towards authorities
of all kinds,
because of the exploitation that generations of people were being experiencing. So when there are charities that are supposed to be allies, but they actually act as allies of the state that tries to deport people, this is really a moment when these charities just lose the trust and confidence of their clients. So people are aware of this, definitely.
And if I may add to this trust issue, Also, when I was on the field, I remember there were police officers from Romania helping the British authorities with these activities, with these initiatives. And I think there was they were losing even more the little trust they had on the Romanian authorities. This was another example when even they lost all the trust they had for the Romanian authorities, which until then they were perceived quite impartial in the topic. But then when you are a citizen and you see that there are the free movement rights are abused by the government authorities in the Great Britain, but also with the support of the Romanian authorities, I think that creates an even more precarious and vulnerable situation.
It's a brilliant example. I
Yeah.
mean, then it wasn't only the embassy that participated in
Yes.
one operation. There were policemen sent from Romania to
Exactly.
UK to pair with the British police. And it's also like, on one hand, those were like patrols that were working with rough sleepers, but also those were projects that contributed to the criminalization of ethnic groups and of national groups, because they're like, okay, so we will come and we'll tell you about the criminality of our people.
Yes. Yeah.
It is very perverse.
Yeah, and this leads us to the next question, which is how is it observed or understood or agreed in the communities where they are coming from? So let's say Romanians being deported back to Romania. How is this perceived by the community? Or Polish being deported to Poland? How is this received? Is it like a lot of resistance? Is it support, the network they're having there? Is there something they can return to?
Yeah, so there's like a lot I could say about it. So let's try to deal with it like by point. So when I talk about deportation, I use the deportation in a broad sense of the word. And it's important to mention this because as the Home Office understands, deportation is on the grounds of criminality. But I'm also looking at various forms of organized returns. So we will have like strict sense of the word deportation that is on the ground of criminality. We will have administrative removal, which is on the grounds of immigration law. As in case of rough sleepers who were found like unlawfully present because they were sleeping rough under the abuse misuse of rights policy in 2016-17. But we also have voluntary return programs for the low income people when they are offered to return and they have some money to pay for their ticket and maybe some package for reintegration in the country of origin. And international reconnection specifically offered to street homeless people. So when we look at all together, all these different types of organized returns funded by the state, sometimes co-funded by charities, there is an assumption that you should go because you will be better off in your country. That this is this assumption that is like underlying, sometimes hidden, sometimes explicitly said to the person. Say, for instance, you should go because you will access welfare in your country. You will go because you have family over there. You have a flat over there, don't you? Those are communist countries. Like this assumption, and also like an assumption that they will be that some of the people who have substance abuse issues, they will be able to access support, and that's not the case. So oftentimes the people who are offered return, they don't have network, like safety network back in the countries of origin, because everybody is in the UK, or some people are in the UK, others are in Germany, and others are in Spain, because the communities are truly transnational and they move. So this assumption that the people have a safety network, will be able to access support and will be able to access welfare, it's not very well grounded. So definitely there is no special offer for deported people. And this this problem is not really like the countries of origin, Poland, Romania, Lithuania, are not really aware of what is happening. So there is no specific offer for the people who were deported and who are being deported. So this is one thing, that there is no support neither on the like state, local authority level or the more micro level of the families. But in communities that have experienced migration a lot and also have experienced forms of immigration enforcement, deportation is something that is normalized and is common knowledge. So, for instance, when I do my research among, like in a Roma community that experiences a lot of migration, it's common knowledge where the people go after deportation, what happens, what are the possible reasons for deportation. So, in a way, it's just another form of abuse and exploitation that the people experience, and it's normalized.
I remember now that you mentioned this common knowledge in the communities. I remember a movie which is called Amar. Doesn't really matter the translation, but it's a good one. It's a really good source. It's also about people being deported. It's a community in Bucharest. And what I was really surprised in the movie and really interesting, they knew the deportation regimes in several countries. They knew all kind of details about the system, which one is better, which one is more human, which is less human, and how can you navigate it or escape it, and really it's interesting. Is this something that you can find also in your examples? Because I know you are focusing on UK, but some of them might have similar experience, because we know the same community was deported from France. There are several examples. It was deported from many countries in Europe. So this was a repeated type of process we could see in several countries.
Yes, definitely. It's a very good example what you mentioned. And I also see it in my data that people adjust their migration decisions and their routes according to what they experience. So, for instance, we also should bear in mind that Romanians migrate to the US, and with the current street migration regime in the US, there are people who are deported from the US. They're sent back to Romania, and it's not necessarily like that they stay in Romania and ever after, but they think about, okay, where to do next. So, for instance, somebody deported from the US decides to go to the UK, and if they have language skills, they already can use it in the UK. But currently in the UK, they may also experience being undocumented and having to deal with this migration regime. I have heard that people who are deported from the UK then go to Spain. So people navigate this transnational space. Their families deal with this, and the family may be separated as a result of deportation, or everybody goes back to the country of citizenship and they decide to go somewhere else, or they decide to try to cross the border again. So people do adjust and they navigate the systems, because in communities where migration is a topic and where migration is a way of life, to cope with this economic situation, they take into account the options that they have and the migration regimes that are available. But what is very important for them is the labor market. So, for instance, for EU citizens, Romanian citizens, UK can still look like an attractive option because of the attractive labor market, where people gain more than, for instance, in Southern European countries, where, on the contrary, they can still, at least in theory, move freely.
Yeah. And that's a really powerful example and explanation. And you already did answer a bit to my next question, but if you can offer a bit more details. So you said this is a way of living. So even if you've been deported once, you will try to enter maybe a different country, not necessarily the same, but you will try to be mobile. Could you see the same type of mobility in both Poland I mean, all the three countries, Poland, Romania, and Lithuania. And if yes or if no, doesn't really matter. How do you explain this desire, this way of living? How widespread is it in the communities, and how do you explain it?
It's another good question. I can speak about my Polish research and Romanian research because it's an ongoing project. I still have to start my Lithuanian part. In Poland, the attitude is a different one, and that's very interesting. And I think it very much says also about the country of origin and the discrimination that some communities face in the country of origin. Among my say Polish cases, that some deported people try to cross the UK border again. So, for instance, I have a gentleman who was deported twice because he was deported and then they went back. He went back to the UK and then he was deported for the second time. But so he and also others, they just stay in Poland. It's important to mention that in the UK, various forms of organized return, such as deportation, administrative removal, also voluntary return, so-called voluntary return as a procedure orchestrated by the Home Office, they come with re-entry bars. So temporarily people are prohibited from going back. And
for how long is it usually?
Depends. It depends. It can be 10 years, it can be 2 years, as in case of voluntary return. It can be 5 years, so it varies, but for some time the people are prohibited from going back. So it gives some people a chance to, in a way, establish. So, for instance, this gentleman that I was able to speak to in Poland, they actually organized some kind of job in Poland, and they established themselves back in Poland. But it's important to mention that I'm not talking about the homeless people. I'm talking about people who had job in the UK. They have job back in Poland and have like some kind of income in Poland. But for rough sleepers, I don't know much about their situation, but it's definitely a precarious one back in Poland. So, for instance, one charity worker in London, she told me that they had a client a Polish gentleman who came to their day center. He would go there to have some hot soup and to wash his clothes, to have a shower, that kind of day center. And at some point he was deported to Poland. And she was in Poland on holiday, and she saw him on the bus stop. And she said he was in worse state that he was in London because he didn't have such a support, such a day center as he had in his borough in London. Yeah, so that's what I have seen in Poland. And on the contrary, in Romania, people are more mobile and they decide to go somewhere else, and they are very resourceful and finding different destinations. In Southern Europe, in Northern Europe, on one hand, their mobility, which is a very important factor, is guided by the family connections. So the family, invite them, provide some, at least for the beginning, some kind of accommodation and also help with finding a job. So it's like a typical child migration, but within the transnational community. So there are more like national options that the people go to.
Really interesting. Do you have an explanation for these differences?
Yeah, I think that in case of Romanians, and often my cases come from Roma communities, migration is more rooted. People are more mobile, and also families are like. Some families are bigger, people live within extended families, have more contact, and that's what facilitates also more migration options. Whereas in Poland, those strategies may be more like individualistic.
I might add also my own experience. I don't know you will agree with it, but I guess the pressure, the pushing mechanisms are also very important here. So they might face more discrimination.
Exactly.
They, the opportunities they have access to are way more limited maybe than in Poland. So I guess something on this part of the explanation as well. I agree the infrastructure is really well developed and there are several infrastructures for mobility. So to the UK is one of them, to Germany is another, to the Nordic countries. So to all of them there are really good infrastructure with it's relatively easy and cheap to reach any country in Europe. So I think that also plays, I totally agree with you, but I guess on the other side there is a pressure, a push as well for them to live and to be mobile and to find solutions.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
With this one, I would like to discuss a bit about Brexit and how this changed the deportation or the mobility regimes in UK, but also in Europe, because it had an effect on other EU countries. And this can be a very good starting point and starting discussion for how important elections are and the politics is for this subject, right? So what type of politics we're having, how we portray in the political discourse the migrants, and so on.
Those are like three huge topics that we could speak about volumes.
And hours.
But let's try. So Brexit brings some important changes. So when it comes to strictly to deportations, now the new coming EU citizens are subject to the same immigration regulations as all foreign nationals in the UK. So there is the deportation conducive to public good for all European newcomers as well.
So the EU citizens were treated preferentially in a way.
Yes, when it comes
before,
because the huge preference and the huge privilege when UK was a member state was that there was the freedom of movement, and the freedom of movement obviously had some exemptions, and it has been criticized by scholars, and I agree with them. But if you were a worker, student, a job seeker, fulfilling some conditions, somebody who's self-sustaining or a family member of the previous categories, you could move freely and reside in UK for over 3 months, for periods longer than 3 months. Whereas now we are subject to the immigration system that is general for everyone. And also we are subject to the deportation machinery that is available to everyone. So, EU citizens, just like citizens of any other country, are subject to deportation on the grounds of criminality, and there is no need to prove that they pose a threat to public policy, public security, and that is a serious or imperative threat, as it was when EU treaties were still in force. It's Article 27 of the Citizens Directive 2004. So it's not it's not active anymore for the UK. It's much easier to deport a person.
Is it visible in the statistics? So the number are increasing maybe, or the share, how does it look?
It fell down during the COVID time, because COVID is another crisis that was happening during the recent times. But now the number of deportations are again growing. And what grew significantly were the port returns. And this is something that we may speak about later, and also the proportion of EU citizens subject to port returns. That is the situation when somebody is rejected entry on the border. This is something that also grew for EU citizens following Brexit, after pandemic, after the lockdowns, because this is when people started to be mobile again. this is one of the changes that was brought about by Brexit. But another super significant change was, and still is, European Union settlement scheme. And the European Union settlement scheme is a scheme, as the name indicates, under which EU citizens that were residing before the end of the transition period in the UK can apply for the residence. And it's either temporary residence for up to 5 years to people who lived in the UK for less than 5 years, or it's permanent residence, which is so-called settled status, and this is indefinite. So there was a scheme that was put in place as a reply to Brexit and UK leaving the European Union. But those who were unable to access it now are they just lack documentation in the UK, and they're subject to deportations in theory. And if they have some kind of problems with the criminal justice system, they're likely to be deported because they don't have the same safeguards as they would have if they had settled or pre-settled status. And then there are also newcomers from Romania. Most likely, like when we look at European Union citizens, Romania, people from Central Europe, people who go to the UK and they have problems navigating the new systems because this is the points-based system that we may speak about. It's difficult to go to the UK with a visa and organize a permit to live in the UK. Many people who migrated after the end of the Brexit transition period apply to USS, but they are found ineligible, and they don't have the permit to live and work in the UK.
And that creates a very wide group of people which are deportable, as you said, right? With a higher chance of deportability.
Yes, I would say that it's like a new European illegality in the UK, and people often they don't understand really what the USS is about and who is eligible, and it's becoming like what we were already saying, a part of the common knowledge in the community that you go and you have to apply to USS, and the people who apply normally they would get a code that that indicates that they have applied and that their application is being processed, which gives them some temporary, let's say, regularization, in a way that if somebody wants to check if they have applied, they can show that they have the share code to prove it. So people use it for the purpose of getting some like gigs in the UK, maybe securing accommodation. But once their application is processed and they are rejected, the share code is not available anymore, and they find themselves either forced to go back to Romania, or they apply again.
Yeah. Many friends and acquaintances I have in the Great Britain are saying that they feel this higher pressure from the British authorities. They're more often discriminated or unequally treated, and they think it's a kind of payback from the Britain for what has happened after Brexit and so on. Is this also visible in terms of deportation? Are more people in this situation? Is it like a higher chance? Maybe they are treated with worse conditions than usually. Can you see this also in your data? If you have a longitudinal perspective, is it like maybe more vulnerabilities which are exposed in this process?
I think my data doesn't confirm what you just said. I mean, when it comes to, and I know that in a way I'm not replying to your question, but what I can see now is the group that is most detained and deported are people from Albania. So not EU citizens, but there is definitely like a pattern to now to target Albanians, and I think that, and this is something that like when we look at the data from like back 10 years, so we can see that there were, I call it like fashions, that the Home Office is targeting certain national groups, because like for many reasons it's easier. You already like develop some kind of strategies to deport a particular group. You already have collaboration with the consulate, so you just go with it.
Yes. Yeah.
So there were Romanians and Polish. Later there was a lot of people from Brazil who were being deported. Now Albanians. So and in a way that it just gets easier. Also, these groups are negatively portrayed by the media, so there is not so much resistance in the civil society against these deportations. Now Albanians are receiving some negative press in the UK because they're being accused of like smuggling people on dinghies and participation in some organized crime groups. So it's all, including also the discourse that I just mentioned, it all facilitates the like easier creation of deportation regime that targets particular groups. Once again, differentiated deportability. And fulfilling the targets if there are any.
Was COVID in a way different? Because we know everything was shut down, mobility was not possible for the majority of people. Were these deportations still carried on, or there was a stop, let's say, in the processes?
Yeah, so COVID was like we all remember COVID. And we all remember that we were just immobile in that times on a very micro level, because we were locked up at our houses, not leaving a lot, but also were immobile internationally. It was impossible to go somewhere like abroad for holiday. People who were scheduled for like educative migrations, mobility, Erasmus, they had to change their plans, etc. So our all middle class life was affected, but not deportations. So the UK still felt that it wanted to pursue deportations. The numbers did fall down, but nonetheless, there were deportation flights, especially to Central Europe. There is data available where the people were being deported to in 2020, 2021. But especially when we look at 2020, where we were looking up in the sky and there were no planes.
Except for
special flights of deportees, and also something that we talked about yesterday, that there were those flights chartered to move agricultural workers to the UK, hence for Britain, but yes, when it comes to deportees, there was a change in pattern that before people who are being deported, administratively removed, that is, like, the enforced returns, oftentimes Central and Eastern Europeans were sent on commercial flights. So, guys, when you travel on flights, look at the back of the plane. If there is somebody that is being accompanied by some sad man, and maybe a lady who is a psychologist, so those are our co-nationals who are being deported. So this is how these deportations were carried out before COVID, and also nowadays. People are often sent on commercial flights, but during COVID there were often chartered flights that were sent Stansted, Warsaw, Stansted or Gatwick, Bucharest. This is how these deportations were carried out during COVID, and the growing importance of charter flights also for Central and Eastern Europeans, and this trend continues. Still, there are still chartered flights carrying people to Central Europe and also to Albania.
And is it diaspora organizations, one of the, so let's say, Romanian communities or Romanian-led communities in the UK? Is it one of the organizations being involved? Is there any, maybe they can support, or they, on the other hand around, they can support the authorities, not necessarily the people being deported. Do you see any interest from these communities? It can be the religious community or maybe the community center or the cultural centers they're having in the communities.
You mean the diaspora organizations that support the people who are targeted for deportation?
Yeah.
Not really.
Which is a bit strange, right?
Which is a bit strange, and I think it just confirms like the how much this ideology of deportability and the belief that if somebody is being deported, there is a reason that they should be deported, and that there is this imaginary that deportation is punishment. If somebody commits a crime, they are sent to jail, they do their time, and okay, yeah. So that's why some researchers also in the U.S. context say that deportation is a double punishment because it's something that not necessarily is a part of the sentence. Oftentimes it's not. So on one hand we have this the attitude of the countries of origin that I already covered, but on the other hand we have also diaspora communities that are not actively supporting. There are rather not so much like some of them are charities, others are like civil society or organizations that help, but they're not necessarily like of ethnic profile, but there are just like all across the nations. There are local British people. There are also people of immigration background that support detainees. For instance, Solidarity Detainee Support Group (SDS), but. It wouldn't be fair if I didn't mention Roma Support Group, based in London, which where people from different coming from with different migration backgrounds. They come from different countries, but Roma Support Group also deals with the problem of deportation, immigration enforcement towards their Roma clients.
Yeah, really interesting, and maybe deserves a bit more attention in future research projects. Why organizations which are really visible and active on so many fields, they are not necessarily doing something related to.
Yeah, but it's like how those organizations want to imagine the diaspora and create the image of the diaspora.
Yeah, I totally agree, and. We have to go slowly to the second part of the meeting. So I have one more topic of discussion, and then we can move to the second part. We're having elections in both Romania and Poland, presidential elections in both countries. Do you see in the current political landscape interest for this type of process? Because we have the so-called nationalist candidates in both countries. I mean, I would say that this is a topic which should be present and it should be mentioned, and we should see debate about it if you are considering the political orientation of these candidates. And if not, why? Why do you think it's not happening? Or if yes, why do you think it's happening?
So I can speak more about the Polish example, and I'm very much interested in what would you say about Romania. But when it comes to Poland, actually migration has become a politicized topic. And migration in a broad sense of the word, both as emigration and immigration. So on one hand, we just like in the last couple of weeks. So I'm talking about May 2025. The narrative on return migration is appearing again. Please, Polish people, return to Poland. We have wonderful opportunities for you. So once again, we have, this is this national project of dealing with demographic crisis. That this is how we will deal with the problem of extremely low total fertility rate in Poland, something that Romania is also experiencing, as I believe. But So there has been this narrative directed to the Polish diaspora living in Western Europe that it's really worth considering coming back to Poland and reestablishing in Poland, contributing to the labor market. So on one hand, that's how emigration is politicized, which I really don't believe will be successful. And on the other hand, we have the politicization of immigration to Poland, and deportation become a part of the political agenda, and there were some attempts of building political capital on envisaging strict immigration policies in terms of deportation of people with criminal record. And there were even attempts to name nationalities that will be targeted. And
Do you think the law or the initiatives are inspired by the experience the Polish citizens had as deported? Do you think it was a source of inspiration? Is there any?
I don't think that they are looking up to the UK, for instance, and the examples of Polish citizens being sent back to Poland. I rather think that what is happening is really looking up to the President Trump in the US. And this is once again, I will use the word perverse, because the Australian case, Canadian case showed us that looking up to Trump is not necessarily the correct way, but it's evident that in Central Europe, the tendencies are different.
Yeah. So in this part of the podcast, we are having Veronika invited. She's a master student in our program in international development and migration, and this is the part of the podcast where she can ask topics which are of interest for her. The question can be addressed to both of us. Thank you for joining us and for the support you provided.
Okay, thank you. And my questions are about more the international world, like the role the role that the international organization have in these situations, and when we talk about migrants. So they should have a role. They had a role in this situation.
Yeah, that's a huge question, a huge topic, and I think a lot has been written about it. I will try to cover some of the topics. So you say international organizations, and we can think when we think about international organization, we can think about International Organization for Migration, IOM. Which is a part of United Nations. And an example of the latter, of the second type, would be European Union with its agencies. So when it comes to IOM, it has a role in supporting migrants in different situations of their life, and it also plays an active role in migration management. So perhaps you who listen to this podcast in Central Europe, you may remember that when you were traveling, there were people coming from Ukraine after the full-scale Russian invasion on Ukraine, and we could see them in the airports because some of them arrived in countries such as Poland or Romania, and then later on they were organizing their trips somewhere else. So, for instance, I remember I was traveling from the Chopin airport in Warsaw, and I met people from Ukraine, and they were going to many different destinations. There was a family going to Seattle. There was family going to Toronto, Canada. So, and they had IOM bags, and that's an example of the work of IOM. IOM did a good job in supporting people searching for protection after the full-scale Russian invasion on Ukraine, and helped with this resettlement of asylum seekers. So that's a very good example of IOM's work in migration management. Another work of IOM in migration management are their programs of assistant voluntary return. Some of these programs are assistant voluntary return and reintegration. And there were very good scholars who work on the topic in various national contexts. So there has been some criticism on those projects, and the voluntariness, the true voluntariness of the participants in these projects has been questioned. So, for instance, Dutch anthropologist Barak Kalir, in one of his publications called "Programs of Assistant Voluntary Return," quote soft deportation, end quote, underlying that there are some problems with the voluntariness, because if you lack the leave to remain or residence permit in a country, and your only option is to leave, otherwise the authorities already know that you are there with no proper documentation, so the alternative would be maybe a deportation. Then you may choose to voluntarily depart. And it's better to have the ticket paid and maybe have some reintegration package, but still it's not necessarily the first option for some of the migrants. Not everybody is very happy about going back to the country of origin, especially if the reasons for migrations are the same, remain the same as first led to migration. So if people are being returned, or if people return, depending on the context and the situation, but still, if people are back in the place where they first migrated, and they still face exclusion, economic hardships, and maybe also threats to their life, as in cases of more dangerous places.
Can I add or ask you, actually? You mentioned two types of these international organizations: the UN related ones and the European Commission, as you mentioned. But do we have also non-governmental international organizations which are involved, like Caritas, or other big players in this? So do they have a role here?
You mentioned Caritas. So going a little bit, going step back to my own project and research on deportations from the UK and also other kinds of organized returns in the UK. You may remember that there is a type of returns that are called international reconnections, and those are specifically addressing people sleeping rough in the UK. So, and those are administrated by charities. So those are so we have UK charities that help people to go back to their country of origin. And part of the guideline for international reconnections is that such a person should get assistance back in the country of origin. And that might be different kinds of assistance. There might be some pocket money included. There might be some substance abuse rehabilitation included, accommodation, etc. So, for instance, when it comes to Romania, my understanding is that Caritas is involved as a counterpart on the Romanian side. In case of Poland, we have international reconnections are managed by Polish charities, so they're not necessarily international ones. I have also heard when it comes to the UK case, I had UK case. When I heard about some forced evictions in Italy, I had heard some criticism towards the Red Cross and their engagement in forced evictions of the Roma people. Romanian Roma people, excuse me.
My other question is about the role of the EU. Like, we are a community, so Romanian people and Polish people in this case are EU citizens as well. So there are any kind of policies that protect people, migrants, and prevent this situation of deportation?
Yeah, within the European Union, the big privilege is the freedom of mobility that I mentioned earlier. So within the European Union for EU citizens, the freedom of movement provides the grounds for unlimited mobility in the case that I mentioned. So First and foremost, the workers, but also students, and those of you who have experienced Erasmus know it very well. So the European Union has a role in giving this opportunity to travel and to move to different EU member states for the EU citizens, but also in giving safeguards from deportation. So EU citizens being in another EU member states, they have protection from deportation, then they cannot be as easily deported as third country nationals, because the assessment must be, and the scrutiny of their cases must be more strict. So, and the general rule, according to the EU Citizens Directive 2004, is that the longer somebody resides in a different EU member state, the more difficult it should be to deport them. So for people who have lived in a different EU member state for over 5 years, considered residents, the grounds of public policy or public security must be serious. And for people who reside there for over 10 years, the grounds must be imperative. So we are talking about people with like criminal record that is like serious, and also the assessment must be future oriented. So the deporting authorities must be able to demonstrate that such a person is likely to reoffend in the future. So definitely European Union provides safeguards from deportation to EU citizens. And when it comes to third country nationals within the European Union, it's also a huge topic. And there is a lot of criticism towards what is happening in the European Union and the treatment of third country nationals. Obviously, it also very much differs country to country. Some countries are more successful, let's say, in deportations. Others are less successful. And obviously, I'm using this term in inverted commas. But what I want to say is, especially speaking from the perspective of Poland and the approach of the Polish authorities to the people crossing the Polish-Belarusian border, the response of the Polish state has been very strict, with a lot of policing of the border and the militarization of the border, and using the measures of immigration management that are found unlawful, such as using the pushbacks towards the people trying to cross the Polish-Belarusian border, coming from the Belarusian side, of course. So there are people who find themselves trapped between in the boreal forest between Poland and Belarus, being pushed by the Belarusian authorities, being pushed back by the Polish authorities, and some of us believe that participation of agencies such as Frontex would perhaps give some supervision of what is happening. And I know that this sounds surprising for those of you who are aware and research the involvement of Frontex in the Mediterranean. But what is happening on the Polish ground is that the Polish border force and the Polish military are just not controlled by any international or supranational body.
Another question is related with my experience as a migrant. And I wanted to ask, in the case of Italy, not my case, because I was like more the second generation, but for the first generation, Romanian people in Italy were perceived like a community that comes in Italy to steal their jobs, steal their works. And it's the same thing for the Polish people who chose to immigrate.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah.
It just happened a couple of years before with the EU accession in 2004. So there was this image of the Actually, when Poland enters the European Union with other 9 new member states, only 3 countries decided to leave their labor markets open for the Polish people, and that was Ireland, United Kingdom, and Sweden. So, for instance, Germany, with a history of Polish migration, decided to keep their labor market controlled and closed for the Polish citizens as long as it was possible up until 2011. And the Polish case, for instance, for the UK people, showed that it's important to do the same and keep the labor market closed when the EU accession of Romania and Bulgaria, because a lot of people migrated from Poland. From a big influx from Poland to the UK because of the knowledge of English. And actually, I come from the generation of people who migrated just after graduating. Some of my mates from my school, they just graduated from high school and off they went to the UK. So it's really a generation experience. And that's very interesting because many European countries were struggling with the crisis in 2008, 2009, and Poland wasn't so badly hit. And it wasn't necessarily because of the policies. It was also because many people just emigrated from Poland. So the unemployment was not that huge because actually people were already unemployed before, but they moved to the UK and they were just mobile and they coped with the strategy in a very individualistic manner, so searching for opportunities abroad themselves. So this was really a way people very proactively search for better livelihoods in the UK, but the image of the nation was negative because there was obviously this attitude that the Polish people are a competence on the labor market and are the same as you said, stealing jobs. And there was this imaginary of the Polish plumber who goes there, and that was very interesting marketing action by the Polish government, who tried to present the Polish plumber in Poland and in France as a very handsome and sexually attractive guy, to in a way change the imagination and the opportunities that come with migration.
Do you think contexts like this, the one that you described, with restrictive labor markets, with attitudes being anti-immigration in a way, are a prerequisite or a foundation of a very laissez-faire deportation scheme? I mean, is it deportation possible on a large scale, rather in contexts like this that you described, or it's not necessarily related?
It's not necessarily related because I think that when I try to think in a international comparative perspective, and I know that is very important topic for your center, I can see that deportations are happening both where migration is very controlled and not so much controlled. Although perhaps there is still that I think about it. Perhaps more laissez-faire approach generates less strict immigration enforcement, on the ground in practice. Because, for instance, there are huge deportation numbers in the US where the access to labor market officially is very controlled. It's very difficult to migrate to the US with a visa and in the US get the residence permit and later citizenship. And the numbers of deportations are huge. Nonetheless, and there is the labor market demand and the people migrate. The autonomy of migration is a topic as well. So regardless of what the immigration regimes will be, people will be migrating because people need to have a job, need to sustain their families. People are fleeing from climate crisis back in their countries of origin. And they will be migrating. Just the question is how hard will their life will be. And the question to the policymakers is how well these people will integrate, and ultimately what should be important for the policymakers is the social cohesion in the countries that they govern.
I have a curiosity which goes for both of you, and I'll be very glad to listen to your understanding and explanations. Why is deportation such a attractive and visible topic? I remember Trump's campaign. This was one of the messages which was used all over again and again, and I think it attracted a lot of attention from the voters' side. Why do you think it's such a attractive topic among voters, among politicians, for the general public in general? I know you most likely you experienced it. You've seen it in Italy maybe as well. It was used. It was. I know there are many political figures using this idea in Italy. So, what is your explanation for this? Why does it have a lot of people agreeing with such a process?
Okay, I think that in the case of Italy, Italian people are like very attached to their principles, their values, their culture. So they feel like attacked by these new people coming from other states, other countries with their culture and with their language, with their values. And many of these communities, not just the Romanian, but I think also the Moroccan community, the Albanian community, the Senegal community are perceived like a community of criminals that created a lot of horrible things, criminal things, and I think that they perceive these people like disturbing their peace. This is yes, disturbing their peace, their balance situation. This is my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what you're saying, it brings certain similarities to the case of rough sleepers that I mentioned. So that foreigners, especially if they are visible and their poverty is visible because they live on the streets, they're seen as like a social nuisance, as a antisocial individuals. So here the quick and easy fix is to sanitize the street, is to clean the streets, and it doesn't really matter what happens to the people. Like, so like if you have a business in like a grocery store or something, and there is somebody sleeping rough on the stairs of the shop, then it doesn't matter. It's important that they disappear. But maybe the correct answer would be to provide the accommodation, and not necessarily to to detain people in immigration removal centers and later to deport them to experience street homelessness back in their countries of origin. And the countries of origin are not necessarily super developed welfare states that can offer a lot to the people. And that's the same in case of the countries of origin you just mentioned for Italy. So this is one thing when it comes to like people who are visible on the streets or who sleep on bus stations, wherever. But also deportation and immigration enforcement is a quick fix to what people perceive as newcomers, migrants, as a labor market competition. And again, deportation is a quick fix, and maybe the proper answer would be to really give people good job opportunities, jobs that pay well, and in case that they are out on the labor market, don't have a job, provide their subsistence in the meantime. So what I want to say is that the reply shouldn't be just to get rid of the people and dispose of their lives, but rather to provide better offer to the people, both nationals and non-nationals. So what I want to say is that those anti-immigration policies, and it is very well exemplified by the Trump 2.0 administration, are a very neoliberal policies that step in when the state is actually inexistent. And also these hyper anti-immigrant policies that we are observing. To name just the example of sending foreigners to a top security prison in El Salvador. This just really shows that people want to build political capital on the basis of some frustration, some anti-immigration attitudes of the Republican voters. But what is really happening is that they are creating hyper anti-immigration attitudes of the voters, things that the voters didn't even dare to think before, that didn't occur to the people before. And as I mentioned, some of the Central European leaders look up to Trump, and this border spectacle may be part of our experience as well. So I just want to highlight this so that we are looking at this in with a very critical lens, and we don't become immune to these very populist arguments that appeal to something that is not our needs. Those are very artificially created needs.
Thank you so much, Agnieszka and Veronika, for the wonderful conversation. We will stop here. It was really, really a pleasure to have both of you, and I hope our listeners will like the episode and the podcast as much as I did. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.